Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, welcome to another episode of African News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla. I hope you're having a lovely week so far. And as is usual, we come together to have this conversation regarding Africa's depiction in Western media. And with me, starting with the sister first, we have Fubara Esquire, author, Your Self-Love Revolution, host, Rethinking Freedom, which is available on 98.5 FM Killeen, co-host, Women and Resistance. And the gentleman needs no introduction, but introduce we shall. He is an explorer extraordinaire, one who's been going. He is Comrade Milton Allimadi. He is host of Black Star News on WB 99.5 FM New York Radio. Author of Manufacturing Hate: How the West Demonized Africa. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brother Adesoji, I'm wondering if your listeners actually know who we have the pleasure of sitting with and listening to. I mean, you give a brief introduction of Brother Allimadi. Brother, can you just tell us just a little bit about
every week.
Yes, just a little bit about your path, how you came to be in this Western part, and whether you can actually go home and, we're talking about how we fight back, but there are real consequences and people are paying a lot of sacrifices. So can you just take a few minutes, if you don't mind?
Of course, no problem. I mean, like many diaspora Africans, I personally cannot go back to Uganda at the moment. I've been engaged in opposing Uganda's dictator of 40 years now, General Museveni. And I'm glad that many people have caught up to the facts now. You know how the West like covering up for their favorite dictator? They covered up for Mobutu for a very long time. So you don't get the sense of how useless he is to the country, but very useful to the West, you see? And that is also one of the main reasons why I engage in critique of Western media propaganda. I mean, they dismiss African media as tools of propaganda. They're the biggest propagandists in the world, but they do it in a very clever way. They preach objectivity, and the way they write it, it does sound objective, right? But I'm sure our comrades who have joined us in conversation on a weekly basis have now learned how to decipher, the propaganda that's embedded in messages that seem very neutral, very objective, when in fact it's the complete. And that's the most dangerous type of propaganda, because the one that's so explicitly open, people can easily dismiss it, right? So my siblings, and I like it that way, they're not engaged in politics the way I am. So they're free to go in and out of our beloved country, Uganda. But this to me is a sacrifice that is worth it, because we're trying to build not only our individual countries, but the entire continent. We want the next generation to have a much better opportunity to really, as Mwalimu Julius Nyerere used to say, so that each and every individual can become their very best. And of course, that's not possible right now in many African countries, when we have individual rulers who treat the country as if it's the private
state.
That's how they treat these countries. So I don't really feel too much hurt by the fact that I can't go to Uganda right now, because I engage with Ugandans in other spaces. I engage with other Africans, and I feel actually very African. confining myself to Uganda, which was historically a British creation anyway, you see? So since I'm not tied like that mentally, I don't feel it the same way a person who would have been tied that, oh, this is my Uganda, my Uganda. I don't feel the same type of pain a person like that could have felt. I feel comfortable and Pan-African in every African setting. And when I say African setting, of course, I'm talking about my sisters and brothers, aka African Americans as well, talking about my comrades from the Caribbean, from South America. So, that is who I am. I teach, of course, at John Jay as well. I'm also finished doing the PhD in history at Howard University. Adesoji mentioned my book, Manufacturing Hate, How Africa Was Demonized in Western Media. And I'm advising people for now, please don't buy the book. I was engaged in struggle with my publisher. The book was doing so well. Then I think the publisher probably read it more carefully and realized, wait a minute, the establishment does not like this book. This is a book the New York Times will not like, for example, because I have memos exposing the racism of some of the reporters and editors at the New York Times. So at some point, the publisher stopped promoting my book, when in fact he was making money and I was making money. And how did I find out? For my students. My students could not find my book. I told them, you're going to the wrong location. I went to the website. It was then that I discovered my publisher, without telling me, had stopped producing the hard version, the printed copy. It was only digital now, even though the contract called for both. That's how I found out. So I started engaging in battle. I won back my copyright a few months ago. So obviously it's going to come out probably with a little variation, change in the title a little bit, so that when people buy the book now, they'll be dealing with me. I don't want the publisher to benefit accidentally. So obviously I have to change the title. So that's why I'm recommending for now, please don't buy the book. The new version will be out probably by Black History Month in 2026.
Awesome.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you. And yes, I mean, what else can be said? I met a good comrade on the Facebook streets and we met in person in New York, so, and what else is there can say? We took the journey forward and here we are a couple of years in. And so, we continue.
Let me add one thing though. I would like to see more gatherings like this, like the space that we've created here. Sisters and brothers, please, we have to create multiple of these types of gatherings. That's how we can really push back against this attack. The attack is not only military. The attack is not only intellectual. The attack is also the media demonization, which softens the resistance, and then they pile the heavy stuff on us. So please create spaces similar to it.
Yeah. And what can I say? And so with that in mind, we go for a bit of remembrance. So as it's customary, news where you're at. So let's start with the sister first now. News where you're at.
The only news I wanted to share today was for people to get a better understanding of the stature of the man that we get to sit with, because we have a saying that I'm going to say it the way we say it. Okay, familiarity ni buteng, which is a combination of Igbo and English and Pidgin and all of that. But essentially what it translates to is that when you have easy access to someone, when you feel like you're very familiar with someone, it actually breeds disrespect. And what I never want to do is to disrespect a man of your stature, the sacrifices you've made, the way that you've paved for the rest of us. And we should bear that in mind as we're dealing with our elders. And it doesn't even have to be elders in age, but just when you see someone has achieved something, has done something on our behalf, even if you later have an issue with them, there's a way as African people we should conduct ourselves. But don't be because, I have access to this person. I see them on the internet, or I ran into them at a bookstore. Now we are. I'm not talking about a hierarchy, but it's about respect. Now we're equals. Now I can just disregard you. And so I'm just very grateful to be in your presence and to be able to say that I was actually ever in conversation with you. So thank you, sir. Any other news I would share about Texas is bullcrap right now.
No, Asante, I feel so honored and blessed because I've been around people like that. That also, I wanted them to know, appreciating being in their circle, And of course, one of them was a mentor, and I aspired for just 10% of his achievements, and I'll be happy. And that, of course, was Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I told you the story already, how I visited him at NYU, and I told him I loved all his books. And he said, which one was your favorite? And I couldn't remember a single one. I had the mental freeze. And I loved the way he really just switched off. He started talking about football instead, soccer. So he put me at ease.
Yes, I mean, what more can I say to what the good sister have said? I mean, you impact wisdom here, and the wisdom which in itself is some sort of seed. And they will say the wisdom of the elders is planting a seed, knowing that the tree that it will be will create a shade, and they might never sit in said shade. So the idea that you want to create an Africa ahead of time, knowing fully well you might not be around to see the Africa, is truly commendable. And yes, we thank you for it. We thank you.
Something to.
So yes, I mean, news from where I am is that the BBC has apologized to Donny Trumpet. Yes, but he's still saying he's going to take forward a possible legal challenge, and we'll see where that falls.
I think he said he's going to sue for $1 billion this coming week. So now, comrade, for listeners not familiar, very briefly, could you tell what the issue was and why the BBC had to apologize?
Okay, so the issue was the January 6th speech was used in a documentary, Panorama, and it was spliced in such a way that it portrayed that Trump was the one that actually edged them on, even though we know if you listen to the entire speech, that was but the way it was cut, it was suggesting that Trump actually asked them to go now and do what happened on January 6th. So
he did.
Yes, he did. You and I know he did. Again, we're playing media semantics, basically saying, well, he didn't exactly say it that way, but it was portrayed that way. So it's the portrayal that BBC is apologizing for as opposed to what was actually said. So what can I say? Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
It's amazing. And probably they fear that because of the diplomatic relations between the U.S. administration and the British government right now, they probably fear a jury might actually find in his favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but apologizing actually makes it worse for them. Because if I was on a jury and I hear that you apologize,
I agree. You're right.
that
Because
actually
now,
makes you feel more guilty.
in fact, and now you're going to actually elevate your obligation financially.
Good. Yeah, but the flip side of that is the public are saying they are not going to support because the BBC is publicly funded. So we're not going to pay the money. So he can bankrupt the BBC for what he wants.
No, you guys have insurance already. There's already insurance for just those purposes. So it doesn't matter what the public says. What's crazy is that we've all been on schoolyards and we understand how bullies function. And apologizing and acquiescing and trying to reason with the bully is just never the way. And so there's at this point, looking at the history of this man, there is no reason to feel, if I give this up, then he will play nice. He's
Absolutely.
never going to. He's just going to want more and more and more. So shame on all these cowards. If the Trump administration has shown me anything for sure, is that we have a plethora of cowards. And some of us need to look in the mirror as well, because there are many of us who cannot speak up. Brother Milton, when you were talking about, hey, some of your family members go in and out and it's not a problem. People choose what they want to take a stand for.
Sure.
For different reasons. I'm not casting aspersions on anybody. The same is true in my family. I'm the most outspoken, and I'm the one that people are like, oh, you're hurting your earning potential, you're hurting your so on and so forth. But we really are globally a bunch of cowards, because there's no reason why a handful of people should have the stranglehold on the rest of us, except that we are so quick to be pacified. And I know that there are different ways that they are indoctrinating us to get us pacified, but my goodness, shame on BBC. Shame on them.
Yes. I mean, I like what the Wall Street Journal did. The Wall Street Journal was sued for what? 10 billion. The Wall Street Journal just wait a little bit, and the actual that doodle that he drew came when the documents were released, and they published that, and he's still denying that is him. But I don't think his case with the journal is solid anymore. So the British should not be forgiven for this capitulation, because they actually harm not only the BBC, but all other media and all other people that
he can't stand up. Everybody else is going to cave or feel they need a cave.
Well,
ridiculous.
It's the BBC. Yes, they will say. The BBC World Service. Okay, so that said, we go to the first news of the day, and it actually comes from the BBC as well. And it's titled Remembrance Sunday. So it reads, Remembrance Sunday, Troves of Record reveals Kenyans' forgotten old war soldiers. And it goes, thousands of Kenyan soldiers fought in the British Army during the World War. So there's a short story here. One day, 85 years ago, Mutuku Ngati left his home in southern Kenya and was never seen again. And it transpired that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which works to commemorate those who died in the two world wars, contacted Mr. Ngati's nephew, Benjamin Mutuku, about mining old documents. So the short of it is, say, the UK recruited millions from its empire to fight in both century global conflicts in theaters across the world. And there are other parts of here that are, pertinent to conversation. It says, like thousands of Kenyans who fought in the British Army, he died without his family being notified and was buried in a location unknown to this day. Decades on, as the UK marked Remembrance Sunday to honor those who contributed to the war effort, the sacrifices of many Kenyan soldiers like Mr. Ngati remains unrecognized. The world knows little of their service, and they're not formally commemorated in the way their white counterparts are. Should we be surprised, sister? No, it's the question. So we can move on.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
No, we should not be surprised. I only have maybe 2 or 3 observations about this story.
Okay.
I don't know how many colonies the British have, whether it was, 50, I don't know. So maybe you can look that up, brother. But if Kenya alone, they're talking about, 3,000, right?
Yep.
Let's say they had 50 colonies. We're talking about 150,000 people. And some colonies were much larger and provided more soldiers.
Correct.
So let's just double that, 300K. So that's just a guesstimate, right?
Yep.
But realistically, the number who are missing could be anywhere from 100K to 400K. 100,000 to 400,000 missing. When soldiers serve and they provide their ultimate sacrifice, which is their life, the armed forces supposed to compensate their families. So I'm willing to hazard a few things. Number one, they knew how to get in touch with the families of some of these individuals who died. And they did not do it because obviously they would have to pay.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, they say this particular individual went missing, just traveled hundreds of miles. and signed up. Signed up implies willingness, correct?
Willing, volunteering.
I'm willing to hazard that many of these young Africans or young Asians, if it was an Asian British colony, were kidnapped. And once you're in the service, you're under their command. It's not like you can escape and just run back to your village once you've already been shipped, in some cases, overseas. Correct?
Yeah,
so
correct.
That's the second thing I hazard. And then, of course, the final point I'd like to make is that now that we know the names, we can trace the families. Now we should start talking compensation. And that's the part that I didn't hear a lot about.
Okay, sister.
I'm so glad that you made the points that you made. If we go and study the history, we know that the World War I and II, the reason that there was even fighting and we had to be involved in Africa was because they were also fighting over control over, quote unquote, their territories in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Minding our business. So if you're thinking about this and you haven't really studied this, you're like, okay, well, World War I, World War II, that was white on white violence. What do we have to do with this?
Yeah.
But the way we got pulled in was because whether it was Africa or Asia, they were also fighting for these territories, right? And so we also know from another story that we did, and now I'm conflating some of the stories we do on African Nigeria and some of the stories we do with women and resistance. But when we covered
Senegal,
we know that the indigenous Africans were required to pay their taxes, right, in the currency of their oppressors after they had taken all the produce and the animals and so on and so forth. The only way to make that money was to work for them. They often required chiefs. They would tell whoever the leader of a village or an area, you must provide these number of people to fight. If you don't, there are consequences. So this idea of he walked hundreds of miles to voluntarily sign his life away to fight a war that did not concern him where he was living is a fallacy. And I'm so glad that you brought that point up so we can debunk this. Similarly to in the United States, I know we have a lot of viewers in the United States. Think of the draft. All your family members who served, not necessarily because they couldn't just, I'm so excited to go and lay my life down for this country that disrespects me. But it was either, you were drafted, you were forced, you didn't have a choice, or sometimes the economic situation. You looked around and you said, okay, well, at least if I'm serving, I'm going to get paid, I'm going to have some benefits and things like that. And the history's littered, even here in the United States, in ways that they tried to ensure they would dishonorably discharge people and things of that nature so that they could short them on their money. Now, what happens to that money that's not, first of all, they were paid at a lower rate than white people because Black lives don't matter. Yeah. Right? That slogan could have been used centuries ago.
Correct.
So first of all, you even, quote unquote, contracted them at a much lower rate. And then even that rate, what happens when it's not paid out, like Comrade brought up? It initially sits in their coffers that eventually if someone makes a claim, but how do you make a claim when you didn't even know that your loved one ever worked for them? You don't have any paperwork, nothing, right?
True.
And when those claims are not made, it eventually reverts back to the state. So they keep that money. So it was a different kind of slavery, you all. We got to get very clear on these things. But let's talk about the numbers according to them, because they have these figures, not even us, right?
Yep.
Some of the numbers, World War I, 1914 to 1918. There's an estimate that says there were 2.35 million Africans mobilized across all these different countries, right? These territories, these colonies, right? That did not include some of them who weren't necessarily like, okay, you are a soldier, but it's a carrier, you're a porter, you were supporting their war efforts in other ways. According to their research, they're saying, which you always know this number is downplayed, that over 250,000 soldiers, porters, and some 750,000 civilians in Africa lost their lives in connection to that war. Now, let's think back to this. Any of you who are children of veterans, if your family did not have your father or your mother alive and working and providing, how did that affect you? Psychologically and every other way, economically. Now, for those of you who have been able to get benefits, maybe to go to college or spousal benefits to be able to keep roof over your head and food on your table as a result of the sacrifice of your loved one, at least you can see where that economic value, the value that it added to you.
Coming in, yep.
So imagine when you lose the person, you didn't even know where the person was. So that ever-ending grief, never-ending grief. If you as a parent today, we see missing children bulletins everywhere, don't even know what happened to your child. You can't even come to some kind of finality of, okay, they're buried. You just don't know, right? So think of that grief and what that does to you psychologically. But then also think of their children, their family members who never benefited financially from the sacrifice of their loved ones, forced sacrifice, no less. So the ways that Africa has been raped and impoverished and stolen from, and every Sunday we come and then every time I'm reading through the articles you send us and other articles that I read, it's a wonder that we can even all still eat and smile and live and attempt to thrive, because the burden of what has been done to us that we keep uncovering it's a heavy burden. So I'll definitely recommend to everyone, after any of these sessions or whatever books you're reading, you need to have a practice as well of wellness, spiritually cleanse. Otherwise, these things can so depress you. We talk about PTSD for soldiers, and I say for African people, we haven't even gotten to the post-traumatic part of it because the trauma is going.
Correct.
You can't even get to the part of, okay, let me heal, because the trauma is ongoing. And I feel traumatized every time we do African News Review. Seriously.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So let me stop there. But of course, you can tie this to the Thiare massacre that we talked about.
In Senegal, yeah.
So
yeah.
when we finally stand up and say, no, enough is enough, pay us. Wait a second. We're stripping you of your weapons, and then we're just going to slaughter you worse than we do chicken. Because we actually have animal rights in this country. It's like Africans have less rights than the dogs and cats and animals that we domesticate and keep in our homes around here. Let me stop
all right.
there.
So it's traumatic, but it's important to know because we don't teach our history.
Yes.
We don't teach our history here, and we don't teach our history on the African continent.
No, we don't.
And that's part of the problem. And without that history...
Growing up in Nigeria, I did not know that we were involved in World War I or World War II. I thought that was their issue over there. But when you now start to get all of this information, imagine that this young man, well, he's not even young, the man that they're interviewing who was named after this soldier that they're now uncovering is 67 years old himself. So his own brothers and sisters, his parents, they're gone. Never got to know what happened to their child. And now it's like, we don't know where we buried them, because here's the other thing they did. White soldiers got individually buried, markers, all of that. There are all kinds of ways that they're commemorated. A lot of African soldiers and others who contributed to this war, forced to contribute, were thrown into mass graves because you don't matter. You don't count.
Yeah,
and
but
we
they know where the mass graves are. They know where they're buried. This is just part of the continued cover-up, of course. So, I actually think we need to have these traumatic moments. We need to have more of it. And that's the only way we can create the type of Africans who will liberate the continent. Otherwise, from each generation, we'll be producing enslaved Africans, and we will never be able to change the dynamics of the relationship that we have with the Western world. To a great extent, a lot of this is because there's still the European and white worshiping.
Yes.
And I would not be surprised if the number of Africans who engage in too much white European worshipping might be 90%, perhaps even higher, perhaps 99%, sadly.
White and Arab worshipping, yes.
Exactly. And that all qualifies as white European worshipping,
Yes. Yes.
So, and that's where we have to start with. We have to start with that particular issue. So, in fact, in the near future, I strongly recommend we engage one of the entire shows on dealing with that issue. And to be honest, that was one of the motivations that inspired me to end up writing that book. Because as a 12-year-old in Tanzania, I mean, my family's from Uganda, but we had to visit Tanzania to get away from Idi Amin. So when I was a 12-year-old in Tanzania, I was a readaholic, always in the library, always in what they call the United States Information Center, the British Library, the German, they call it the Goethe Center, I think.
Yeah, Goethe
Reading
Institute.
all these Western media and how Africa and Africans and African descendants globally were projected, were covered. And even as a 12-year-old, I was horrified. I said, there's something wrong with this. But obviously, as a 12-year-old, how do you intervene? You can't engage. It took me a long time. I remember I'm sitting in a freshman English class at Syracuse University. The professor's reading passages from Joseph Conrad, the most
Heart of Darkness,
demonizing facts, comparing Africans to organisms as the boat is streaming down the river, looking at Africans. They looked as if they'd escaped from a mental asylum, and you feel horrified that you as a European, you're somehow related to them. And the professor's reading this with a huge smile and saying, these are some of the best passages ever written in the English language. So, of course, the European students are very impressionable about that, nodding and following his sense of elation as well. I'm the only one probably sitting there with my skin really the hairs standing up. And the worst thing about that experience was I could not say, Professor, you're wrong, because then he would have asked me why, and I would not have been able. I was not yet equipped to intervene
answer the question
at that time. So I made it a mission to do the type of research that I engaged in, which ended up in that type of book. And I say this to encourage our people, whatever stage of life you're in, stop European worshiping. Be yourself. Always remember the basics. All humanity started in East and Central Africa. Human beings not spread around the world to populate other parts of the world. Every human being would look today like the three of us on this program right now. You see? So once you know that, how can you worship anybody else? Worship yourself, because everybody else worship themselves. Okay?
Okay. I would just like to add, so the news is based in the UK, and majority of the soldiers fought for the British. It should not surprise you that here in the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom did not recognize the efforts of the African and Caribbean soldiers until 2017. That is 72 years after the guns fell silent in 1945. Still, the only commemorative plaque they have is at Windrush Square, which is in Brixton, a far cry from the centre of London, where they have, hold your breath, they have a massive monument on one of the most expensive roads in London to horses that died in World War I and World War II. Yes.
All right. So listen, I spoke about being willing to accept trauma, something you should leave out. We didn't need to hear that about that.
You can't make this stuff up. It's mind-boggling. But hey, again,
let me add one more thing. More thing. The Europeans are always on the same page when it comes to certain issues. So let me give you one example. I'm doing research many years ago, and I came upon an article in the New York Times from back in the World War I era.
Okay.
A German war veterans organization sent an official letter of protest to the British government for allowing African soldiers in Africa to take German soldiers prisoners of war and march them ahead of them.
Yes.
At the very least, they should have been taken captives by European soldiers. Think about it.
So, yes. And
because we don't want to give those Africans any ideas.
Precisely.
Precisely.
So the Supreme Court ruling in the United States of a black man has no rights that a white man ever has to respect. That is a global perspective.
Absolutely.
For white nationalists.
Yep.
People really need to go back and study Marimba Anisi, because she speaks to their psyche, and that we are waiting to see, was there a conspiracy where they all met in one place and agreed to act towards us in a certain way? And if we don't see that, then it's not a conspiracy. But no, actually, there is a mindset. And wherever they are.
Sister, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you for a second. I'm sorry. Because I had this same conversation in my class and my PhD program a few weeks ago with 3 comrades. I said exactly what you said. They don't need to conspire because there's some things that they pre-agree on. They don't need to discuss it anymore. And the 3 comrades were arguing that, no, they conspire. I said, no, they don't conspire. Thank you. And you were not even there. Please continue. That was great.
So I was actually, when you said this.
Finish the thought yet.
No, I'm done. Just people need to go and study Marimba Ani and what she wrote about Urugu. It's a thick book. I don't have it close enough to pull, but it's a thick book. But if you study that book, she is explaining their psyche, the despiritualization, and that they go through, and how that they infect that into everything. And pretty much, listen, I'm willing to argue this one with you. Everything they touch dies. The water is polluted. The environment is polluted. The animals die. I mean, in their own museums, the Museum of National History, I believe it is in DC, they talk about the greatest predator, the greatest threat to all the animals in the world. They say human beings, but I'm like, no. Let's be specific here. It ain't human beings. It's you all. And if you don't like it, argue with your mamas and your papas and your foreparents, and actually argue with yourselves, because you're still doing it right now.
And of course, part of the problem is that and that's the difference, right? We have that essence of spirituality. But once you make capital your God and you worship capital, that's the end of you. Because now you don't care about the environment, as you just mentioned. You don't care about any other living things. You don't care about other human beings as well. Because that's how you manufacture that white supremacy ideology to justify not treating them like human beings. Because if you elevate them to human status, how do you exterminate the indigenous people in the United States, in what is now the United States? How do you exterminate indigenous people in the Caribbean? How do you exterminate Africans, Herrero.
How do you blow up boats in the Caribbean with no proof of anything? You just and just take people's lives willy-nilly.
I mean,
and the rest of the world stays silent and actually keeps acquiescing to you.
To Urugu, I will
How
also
do you exterminate the Palestinians, and you have articles in the New York Times debating whether this should qualify as a genocide or not? Think about that.
I mean, you use the word exterminate. I would enjoin people to actually read this book, Exterminate All Brutes, by Sven Lindquist. Again, it talks into the mindset of the European. So we've done the first story. For those who want to read more about Africa's and the Caribbean and Black people's contribution to the World War effort, you can read David Olusoga's book, The World's War. And in fact, I mean, there are some painful bits that are just left out that's just not necessary for broadcast. It's crazy. So we go to the next story. Speaking about spirituality, we go with the French story, which says, Paula White Kane Trump's spiritual advisor embarks on a tour of Africa. The televangelist and head of White House Faith Office, while visiting Great Lake region, has backed the U.S. administration push for peace treaty between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. This piece comes from Le Monde. It's a French newspaper, so we're reading the English version of it. So, as you can see, Donald Trump has deployed his personal brand of Christian diplomacy for the first time to Africa. The face of this initiative was the America's president's spiritual advisor, Paula White-Cain, who on Tuesday, November 4, officiated in a church before several hundred worshippers on the outskirts of Libreville, Gabon, in the first of her stops on the continent. There is one key part here that I wanted us to touch on, and it's here. Yeah. Behind the scene, White House team has worked diligently in early November to organize this African tour. The date has also carefully been chosen. It comes 1 week before Rwanda's President Paul Kagame and Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi were scheduled to visit the U.S. Capitol on November 15. The two rivals were expected to sign the final peace treaty between the two countries, which has been at odds with the North and South Kivu province located in DRC's east. There is one part here. The two rivals, they're not rivals. One has invaded another one's space. Finally, the agreement was also a way for Washington to outmaneuver China in the race for critical minerals in the Great Lake regions. So, what say you?
Sister, you go first. I'll take care of the loose ends.
Okay. First of all, y'all, it's so important to remember. Do you remember Paula White? Do you remember Paula White and Randy White and their church in Florida that was largely funded by Black old people, pension funds, retirement, all of that coming in to get the word of God? Because, religion is like a panacea. It's the opium of the people, all of that. We're just hoping that,
Amen.
yes, we give our bodies here on earth and we might be living hell here. But if we act right and pray to the right white God, we will go to heaven later.
Amen.
And she, I believe if I'm recalling correctly, her husband then, because she's been divorced, I think 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
3 times.
Twice.
Yeah.
Now she's on to the third version.
The third person. Okay. That doesn't include Benny Hinn that she supposedly had an illicit relationship with. I said supposedly, allegedly, I'm covering my tracks. Okay. There were pictures, but who knows. But I believe her husband was sick. Randy White was sick at the time when she was just like, hey, everything is about to blow up. They're about to find out that we've been siphoning money out and everything. And she just walks. The next thing, she's tapped herself onto Donald Trump. She's living in the Trump Tower and so on and so forth. And this is his spiritual advisor. She's this amazing pastor that has been propped up by and large by Black pastors. Because when, she's calling this Archbishop in quotations, Nicholas Duncan Williams, her spiritual father. But I also have videos of her calling T.D. Jakes her spiritual father. And her cadence and how she preaches and all of that is absolutely copied from what we stereotypically see as how Black pastors preach.
Yep.
But we're just always so enamored when white people do what we do. So you see the videos of a white person doing an African dance and we're all just like, oh my God, look at that. It makes me feel so much better. So this enamorment that we have again with whiteness. So anyway, she's the Christian spiritual advisor to a man who his shadow does not cross a church, who did not know he was holding the Bible upside down. So I don't even know if he reads it all, who called the thing 2 Corinthians. Anyone who's been to church even one day in their life, it's 2 Corinthians. But anyway, she's his spiritual advisor. And she brought this William Duncan man or Duncan Williams man to the U.S. to pray for Donald Trump during his inauguration, the first term in 2017. Who is this man? Yeah, pray. He prayed over Donald Trump while he's PREY praying on Africans. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
Have we seen this before? Yes. First, they come with the missionaries.
There is, yeah.
No, actually, sometimes they come first with the traders, and you think you're trading equally. Then they bring the missionaries, and as Desmond Tutu said, they say, oh, come together, because they know we are a spiritual people. If we get them spiritually, we got them. The Arabs knew this with Islam, and these white nationalists know it with Christianity. So they came. Desmond Tutu said, let's pray. Close your eye. Let's pray. We closed our eyes because we're spiritual people. We're seeking God. If you say you're going to help us draw closer to God, we're all for it. We open our eyes. We had the Bible, and they had our land and all our resources. So here is this man now.
Again.
We need these resources. Let's send the Christians in, and let's find the damn accomplices in Africa again who will sell us out so that they get a few more gold chains, because you go to Google that man, he always got some gold chains hanging down around him. I think he too is on his third wife. These are our spiritual leaders. Whatever you think of the Bible and whatever, I'm not casting aspersions. I'm just going by what they say we're supposed to be living.
And he says he lives by the scriptures.
Open the doors and usher in the millions of people who believe him and say, hey, trust me, this woman is our friend. And whoever else she brings in with her and whatever else they offer you, just trust it's the will of God. And we stupidly, foolishly allow ourselves to be manipulated because we are a spiritual people. But you got to know who you're worshiping. And there was a video that I watched where this young woman said, wow, Africans, we import everything, including our gods.
Powerful.
And so Black people, Africans, please wake up. They've used these same tactics before. It worked for them. Why would they stop? But we've got to learn the tactics, and we've got to stop it.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Very good. Now, I love that. In fact, as I'm listening to you, I know the essay that I'm going to write maybe later tonight. I know I have a lot of I have a lot of projects ahead of me, but I'm going to try to find time just for a short essay saying, decolonize the mind again. Because everything we are talking about today, all these weeks, is about decolonizing the mind. And it's sad because now you realize that the governments we have in place are not capable of rising to the challenges that we face. You know, the economic trade challenge, that is a major challenge, but it's only one of the many challenges. If we cannot transform the mentality of the Africans who lead, the Africans who are led, you know, we are talking a few decades before we can engage in real battle. You see? So when we talk, we realize the magnitude of the challenge. But it all comes back to the type of Africans that we are producing. Because unless you are intellectually, mentally reoriented and prepared to engage in these battles, you're always going to be a victim. I was a helpless victim when I sat in that classroom. Listened to a professor insult me to my face and my people, right? Today, that would not be possible. I would tell him, sit down, let me walk you through, you see? And that's in just one realm. So in all the other realms that we are trying to, to compete in or elevate our position, we have to have that type of preparation, really. Otherwise, it's going to be futility upon futility upon futility. And I like the way Rodney put it. You heard that book, I think, a few minutes ago. And no, actually, he has it in his lecture. In his lecture, he has it in, I think, in either Crisis in the Periphery or Race and Class in Guyanese Politics. No, it's in Crisis in the Periphery. He said Europeans always come up with an answer. We need to come up with our answers preemptively, not be reactive. You don't wait to be killed and then you're trying to deal with it, you see?
Okay.
And let me add, so imagine.
And what they've convinced us to do is you're incapable of thinking, and we are more advanced than you. So when you have problems, don't think through the solutions yourself. We've already,
We'll think for you.
cut off your trajectory. We don't know what Africa could have been, would have been, had these people left us alone. So listen, don't bother your little heads to think, because it will give you a headache. We have already done the thinking for you. We're going to bring the solutions, and just shut up and implement them the way we're telling you to, and it will be okay. Well, wait a second. This is going to affect the environment. Shut up, and that you are not capable of thinking. Who called us a nation of children? Was it Marcus Garvey?
Marcus Garvey, yes.
And we act like a nation of children, too many of us, too often, and they treat us as such. And we got to get out of that. We have to solve our own problems. We have to think through our own solutions, like you said, Brother Milton.
One thing I like is that I've seen transformation within a few months. My students at John Jay are not the same human beings by the end of the semester. They are not. The first week, they're young, there's that disinterest. By the third class, you notice the level of attentiveness. You can see in the eyes, you can see in the focus, you can see when at the end of the class, they're not rushing to run out of the class. They come to engage you in further conversation, even after the class is over. Or when they tell you that they go home and they teach their parents what they just learned. So that gives me much hope. It means that if we provide our youth the right guidance and education, they can do the rest.
Absolutely.
Yes. Speaking of leaders, Sister Aya did points. Our leaders sometimes we go to Djibouti, which is not a country we've really covered on here in a while. And again, the story comes from Le Monde, the French newspaper. Le Monde is the world in French. So Djibouti's President Guelleh announced candidacy for 6th term. Ismail Omar Guelleh, 77, has been in power since 1999, 26 years, young him. Djibouti's President Ismail Omar Guelleh, in power since 1999, confirmed Saturday, November 8, that he would run for a 6th term in elections next year after Parliament removed a constitutional barrier that prevented him from running. And he did the respectable thing. He accepted the nomination from his party to do so. But there is one part here that I think is part of the conversation we should have, is that this country is host to, the Horn of Africa nation is a stable state in an often troubled region, operating a major port that hosts military bases for the United States, France, China, Japan, and Italy. Guelleh promised to reaffirm his commitment to unity, stability, and development amidst global challenges ahead of a presidential election set for April 2026. Yes.
Yeah. So that generation that's declared war on the youth of Africa, that's what they're doing.
Wow.
And in this case, it mirrors 100% what happened in Uganda with Museveni. First, he had Parliament remove the 2-term limits.
Yes, in 2010.
And then a few years later, he had Parliament remove the age 75 term limit. The year before, it removed it, heading 2 years prior to the last election. He was interviewed on Al Jazeera. He said, so the Constitution has a 75 age limit. And by the next election, you would have been
well
above
over
75.
Yeah.
So, and there is talk that you might have to, you're actually thinking of changing that and removing that. What is your response? He said, I will abide by the Constitution.
To be fair to him, he was nominated by his party.
And of course, he removed the age limit. So, but now what we have is as the epicenter of youth resistance, at least right now, is Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And my only hope is that the youth of Djibouti and other parts of Africa will be engaged intellectually with them in social media, because these things cannot be confined. And I see it reverberating around the continent. It's only a question of time, but the trajectory is in that direction. So who knows? Of course, he's going to appoint his election commission. They'll declare him the winner and all that stuff. But who knows how long he will survive? The trend right now is trending against people like him, people like Paul Biya, people like Akatara, people like Museveni, who's also 82 and is running in January. So that's my assessment of that article. And the most important part, as far as the West is concerned, is the part that you read about Djibouti being a piece of haven of stability in an otherwise a turbulent region.
Yeah. Sister?
Someone in the chat says, when people tell Africans to respect their elders, are these the ones we're supposed to respect? And that is an issue, right? Because we're largely raised, you don't talk back, you don't question and all of that. But I'm glad to see that the youth are saying, nah, you've got to act in a way that commands that respect.
Absolutely. Okay. And that's the key part. The elders command the respect, because the elders back in the day, at some point, they would transition from active participation, even in political affairs, and they become the council of elders, providing guidance, leadership, and advice to those who are now the new governors and rulers. So thank you for making that qualification.
So again, we can't study any news article for any of the African countries, or really anywhere in the world, without looking at the history. So what is the history of Djibouti? And understanding that this country only, quote unquote, and I put that in big quotes, got its independence in 1977. Ask me how independent that is, because if someone right now posted on social media that you are going to have 5 foreign countries have military bases anywhere that you currently live right now and still call yourself sovereign, that would be a joke. And of course, it's tied to the port. And that port is also the only access for goods for Ethiopia that is landlocked as well.
Correct.
So a lot is going on there, but it's totally being commanded, if you will, by foreigners.
Yeah.
And so the price of living in Djibouti is actually very high.
Correct.
Because you have all these external forces and what they're doing and the resources that they have, as opposed to the people. So again, when I look at the issues of democracy and so on and so forth, and what these constitutional changes, I'm looking at what has this leader done for their people. So this man was the chief of staff of the first president of Djibouti. Djibouti has only had 2 presidents. The first one was in power from 1977 to 1999. I think he died in power, something like that. Along those lines, he did hand over. And then this man, who was the chief of staff, has stayed in power now from 1999. And again, he's planning to stay until the ancestors call him home.
Yep.
This idea of treating Africa again like you're basically gosh, his name just left my head. Rhodes.
Yeah, Cecil Rhodes.
Looking at Cecil Rhodes, looking at Leopold Singer, where it's like, these are my territories and they are beholding to me. It's kind of the mindset that some of these African leaders have taken on. But when you look at what's happening with the people of Djibouti, they're looking at a 50% unemployment rate across the board.
50%.
For the youth, it's even higher than that. So you're not even doing anything really to provide for the educational or healthcare needs or the financial needs of your people, while you are letting all these other people stay and demand and command what happens with your resources. And you just stay in power and you're doing well personally. Yeah. And so that's all that matters. And so the last election, I think he won it by 97%, according to him.
Correct, yeah.
But now that he's declared that he's running again, there's no opposition.
Yeah.
So he's going to win this time by, I guess, 99.97%. The question is, what are we going to do? And unfortunately, the burden is going to be on our youth to truly overwhelm these African elites. absolutely overwhelm them. And I'm not advocating violence. Having said that, these people are not going to go away willingly. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Our young people, you're going to have to save yourselves because our elders are not going to save you.
Without a doubt, it's much better to take that risk than to drown trying to cross the Mediterranean, to end up in Europe, cleaning somebody's toilet, working in some kitchen. You have all the wealth on the continent. You have to seize the day. This is your moment.
Did you see that story of the 3 young men who rode on the bow
of a ship to Ghana? Yeah, I saw it.
11 days across the ocean, I guess with whatever food they had in their pockets or whatever,
No,
just to make it into Spain.
That's uncalled for. That's uncalled for. That's just
dangerous.
They just affirms what I just said. Why take that type of risk when everything is right there at home? We cannot allow these petty individuals who only care about their stomach and that of their family and their acolytes and the sycophants. We need to really instill in our youth the value of their lives. Once they value their lives, they won't allow that kind of abuse to happen. I never heard of that story, but it's not surprising. It's horrific.
I mean, it's a symptom of the kind of problem the African societies are in at the moment. The youth are really, really desperate, but this is just falling on deaf ears with regards to these leaders. And final story. It's one about which will probably make the sister smile because she's got a project like that, and I would like her to speak about the project as well. So it's the man on a mission to save Mauritania's city of libraries from encroaching desert sands. Desert settlement of Djibouti faces rising sands, dwindling tourism, and insecurity due to conflict in neighboring Mali. On a recent afternoon, 67-year-old Saif Islam made his way into the courtyard of a library in Djibouti, a tiny desert settlement nestled in the Sahara in Mauritania. And the essence of this story is, he says, it is this book that gave it this history, the importance, he said, pointing to a 10th century Quran, its pages brown with age. Without these dusty old books, Djibouti would have been forgotten like any other abandoned town. And you can see it. I mean, it's basically been overrun with sand. Djibouti rose to prominence in the 13th century as a type of fortified settlement called the Kisar that served as a stopping-off point for caravans plying the trans-Sahara trade routes. It then became a gathering place for Maghreb pilgrims on their way to Mecca, and over time a center for Islamic and scientific scholarship, referred to variously as the City of Libraries, the Sorbonne of the Desert, and the Seven Holy City of Islam. Its manuscript libraries play host to scientific and Quranic texts dating from the later Middle Ages. And so, the first story goes to Sister. How does this sit with you? Being that you have a library as well, and you might want to talk about it.
So actually, this is a very real threat to these libraries. When we were in Kemet, when I traveled in 2023 and also again in August of this year, we saw areas where they had initially been completely swallowed by the sand, that they didn't even realize that these temples were underneath, and then they had built things on top of it, and then later it was excavated, exposed, and so on and so forth. So it's like you see the ancient temples on the bottom, and then there's a mosque that was built on top, and people were actually living in homes on top. So like this is real in terms of the desertification and what sand dunes and how sand can absolutely bury a place. And there's so much of our knowledge and history that's buried both by sand and by water, because the other thing we saw in Kemet was that in creating that dam, that there were a lot of temples and other culture areas that house cultural information that are flooded under the water. Maybe we will never be able to access or get that information. So this is a very real issue. I'm glad that there's an article bringing this to prominence. I'm glad that there are some entities that are working towards cultural preservation. My issue, because I'm not looking for white folk to save me. My issue is always, what should we be doing for ourselves? And so what you see with Africans not being as invested in maintaining our own culture, our own history, our own quote unquote artifacts, which is not a term that I would use, but the things that show who we are and what we've been, and that give us like a service compass as to what we could be again, is first of all colonial erasure, right? That colonial powers dismantled our African knowledge systems, promoted European superiority. And so we do not find value. We're not even bothered to see if there's value in what we had. They said it's darkness, it's the heart of darkness, so that all of that can be done away with. We're not actually even thinking about it. And certainly we know through our educational system, like Comrade Allimadi was saying earlier, there's so much we're not being taught. So we don't even know to look and say, oh, you have all these students who are looking for PhD topics, their master's thesis and their PhD thesis. Go over there before someone from the Sorbonne comes and then writes the book and becomes the expert or whatever. Looking at post-colonial state priorities, the fact that we have inherited these very fragile economies that were already so indebted to the colonizers that we don't really have extra funds the way we're set up right now to say, oh, let's go preserve some culture. Like, people don't have food on their table. So folk are thinking about, hey, can I eat? Not can I preserve some books and things of that nature. So all the unemployment, the climate threats, the food insecurity, and then, of course, the fact that we even have the insecurity with them bringing in these mercenaries and all these guns. And so you don't even have peace where you can really sit down and think. One of the things that being so insecure causes is that you're constantly in this fight or flight or freeze, that the ability to even sit down and think and say, okay, what do we need to be working on? Let's go retrieve this. It's not happening. And then, of course, the psychological displacement, these narratives that devalue African culture. And so there are probably some people who have the resources to help out with this. Some of our celebrities and other folk who, would think nothing of dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on a car, who might see this information and it's of no use to them, because it doesn't matter. So, how to turn this around? Definitely looking at our educational system, rewriting our curricula, because there could be field trips. There could be other ways, even now with technology, that we are broadcasting this information to schools widely across Africa and preserving it in such a way. Digitization efforts. We have the resources, and we have the young people who are unemployed, who would gladly be employed in this kind of capacity.
Correct.
And then, of course, community economic investment, and then training the youth custodians. Because here again, who is it that they're interviewing about this? He's 67 years old.
Yeah.
Who has been trained? Who is going to follow up? Who is going to preserve these things? And of course, here in the United States, too, we see the dying libraries. Books are just being thrown out. That's why I buy what I can. I'm keeping what I can, because we're going to wake up one day and look around and, it used to exist, but no one can find a copy anymore. And then, of course, our governments have to recommit, because there's really no true sovereignty, no true independence if we don't go back and connect to our history.
Yeah. No, very good.
Then really quickly, yes, we opened the first public library in Opobo in Nigeria. This is my ancestral homeland. We had over 3,000 youth with no access to a library. It's just a 2-room library for now, because we're fighting internal structures we're saying we'll find the money, just give us the approval to have a space, or to build a space, have land to build a space. But the library is very well utilized by the young people. Of course, can we have more? Yes, but it's also changing the narrative, changing the culture in the place. And I'm very grateful. Some of you who are watching, I can tell, have donated in the past to the efforts to keep that library open 5 days a week. So we have 2 librarians, full-time librarians that we pay. We also have a school that we've now taken on, and we have about 25 teachers and other people, staff members, who we are paying every single month, in addition to trying to help shore up the infrastructure. So for all of you who've assisted in any way, Santa Sana, thank you. But listen, this is the work that we all must be doing. And whether it's $5, $10, if a mass number of us are doing that consistently, there's no issue we have in Africa or in the African diaspora that we cannot address ourselves. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell them how they can reach out to you?
You know, at this point, just send me an email at aya@ayaanelli.com and tell me what you're interested in, and I can take it from there so I don't take up more time. And I'll put that in the chat as well for those who are interested.
Okay. Brother Milton, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this is a project that you should undertake yourself, probably. Adesoji, since you introduced this, I think you should undertake this project. I think you should invite people to participate in maybe the first 10 minutes of your next show and discuss the project and launch the project. I think you could get young people involved in rescuing. So it would be something like a rescue knowledge or rescue library projects. And this can be your first engagement. And then you can jump to other locations. But this one is a very interesting story. I can see young people relating to it and wanting to engage and take this as a project and adopt this situation. And then after that, you look for another one. There are many. And eventually it will grow and it could have significant impact. It's such a good opportunity that I think you should not miss it. I think you should launch something related to this.
Okay.
Give it thought. I know you're juggling like a million projects.
Exactly. So, you have your marching orders. Okay. Okay. We'll do that. And yes, so on that very inspiring note, we've come to the end of another African News Review. It's been one brilliant episode, and I hope people have found value in it. And if you have, do help the channel by subscribing. We're hoping to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And so we're nearly there, but yes, every other thumb helps. So subscribe. Ask everybody else to subscribe as well. So like, share, and do all the necessary stuff. Brother Milton, final thought?
Asante sana. See you next week.
And sister?
There's truly nothing impossible for us. So no matter how heavy some of the news is, we've got to believe in our power to change things. But it starts with each and every one of us. So I appreciate Comrade Allimadi actually giving us assignments. Like, if not us, who?
Yeah.
And he gave himself an assignment as well. He's like, I'm going to go write this article. So everybody has a role to play. And if you're not playing a role, you're part of the problem.
Well put.
Well, and I'll just use the title of Kwame Nkrumah's last book, which is Africa Unite. And so unite we shall. And so until next week, it's good night and God bless.
Asante sana.
That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.